language learning and assessment, and then we're going to look together with Rados at the British Council, the Young Learner Test. So,
那我们等一下我会先讲英语学习跟评鉴的部分，然后呢，英国文化协会这边呢会分享我们现在新的一个检定课程，检定。
we're going to do, well, 4 things in this session. We're going to talk very quickly about why are we learning, why are we teaching English. We're going to think about how languages are learned and how it impacts how we teach. We're going to think about how languages are assessed, and if we're actually assessing, what we need in terms of using language, and then we're going to look at the British Council Young Learners, the test, and the adaptive nature of it.
那我们今天会讲4个重点。第一个呢，我们讲说为什么我们要学英文或教英文，还有语言是到底是怎么被学习或是被教导的，以及语言的评量评估又是怎么做的。最后会跟大家分享英国文化协会的这个 Young Learners 的测试，这个初级英语检定呢，它是适应性的。
There is going to be some time for you to also say things. Now is one of those times. So I'd like you to think about why are we learning or teaching English. If you're on a table at your own, just chat to the person behind or in front of you. And if you're sitting next to somebody, talk to them. Just that question, why are we learning and why are we teaching English? And I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to think about it.
那我们要首先呢，给大家一点时间去讨论一下，为什么我们在学习或是教育英文哦。那请大家跟前后左右的人讨论一下，大概2分钟的时间，为什么我们在学英文，或是为什么我们要教英文？
Okay, let me show you the reasons I have, and if you have something that you think is very different, please let me know.
我们来看一下我的一些答案，如果你们的答案跟我不一样的话，也可以跟我一起分享。
So, why are we learning or teaching English? 1, it is tested in important tests. And by important tests, I don't mean the school tests that they do twice a semester. I mean things like in Taiwan you have 学测, 会考, and then you have proficiency tests like IELTS or the Cambridge exams or those kinds of exams where your performance determines if you can live in a certain country or study in a certain place.
那首先呢，就是考试会考，而且是重要的考试会考。我讲的不是学校里面每天那种考试，是一些重大的考试，像学测会考或者是雅思啊这一类的，可以影响到你能不能出国去就读或者是居住的这一类的考试。
Second reason is because it's needed for work and study. A lot of the academic materials that people have access to are written in English. A lot of research papers are published in English, and a lot of communication that does not involve native speakers happen between people from different countries, and the common language they have is English.
第二点呢，就是工作或者是读书、阅读读书的时候会需要用到，比方说有很多研究的论文，它可能是用英文书写，或是你要发表论文必须要写英文，或者是在跟人沟通的时候，大家来自不同的国家，所以你必须要去使用英语。
It also gives you access to media and knowledge. A lot of, for example, if you're interviewing somebody that's, for example, Swedish and they are in Argentina and they don't speak Spanish, they're more than likely going to happen in English. So it gives people access to media and it gives them access to knowledge.
第三个呢，就是英语可以帮助你去接触到更多的媒体或是更多的知识，比方说媒体访问瑞典人或者是阿根廷人，那他们用的他们可能要用英语去接受相关的访问，所以呢，你可以使用英语的话，就可以接触到这一些媒体、这些知识。
The next one, it allows you to speak to the world, so you can meet new people, and often those new people that you meet could be friends. And it's one of the reasons I think perhaps that things like translation apps won't take over our need to communicate and connect with people in a certain language.
下一点呢，就是你可以跟这个世界去做交流，你可以认识新朋友，交到新朋友。这也就是为什么我们常常会使用一些翻译的软体，因为这样可以帮助你去跟别人去做交流。
The next one, it allows you to discover different cultures, to enjoy traveling more because it's easier to communicate, and you don't have to get to a place and be afraid that absolutely nobody's going to understand you.
第5点呢，就是学会英文可以帮助你去了解不同的文化，还有到世界各地去旅游。你不会因为去了一个地方觉得害怕，不知道那个地方的语言而就担心。
Now, as much as teachers are worried about grammar and vocabulary, the main reason why students learn English is because they want to be able to communicate, and they want to be communicated to.
那老师在意的呢是怎么去教他们的文法对不对啊，词汇对不对，字有没有拼对。但是学生在意的事实上是能不能用这个语言去沟通、去交流。
Is there anything that you discussed that does not fall into any of these categories?
那刚刚请大家讨论为什么要学语言，或者是为什么要教英文的时候，有什么理由是我刚刚没有提到的吗？
No? Okay. So let's move from why to how. And I think it's important that we think about how languages are learned because it tells us the best way to teach. It helps us decide how to best help our children, if they are young learners, or our students. It informs us what to teach next. It tells us which mistakes we have to correct if they're making mistakes. It clarifies where our children are in terms of their language ability and their language learning journey, and it helps us assess what students really need.
所以呢，我们现在从为什么到怎么做，那我们要了解是语言他们是怎么样被学习的，这可以帮助我们找到最好的教学方法，帮助我们去判断怎么去帮助我们的孩子，让我们知道接下来要教什么，要纠正的是哪一些错误，判断我们的学生的能力到底到哪里，而且呢，知道我们可以去评估他们真正的需求。
So before we talk about that idea of using language and that being the main reason students learn a language, let's look at what is language and what is language learning.
那所以呢，我们刚刚讲到说，学生真正的需求呢，就是使用这个语言。所以我们先来看看什么是语言，还有什么是学习一个语言。
In a very simple, and I mean a really simple breakdown of what it is, language is grammar, vocabulary, and phonology. So vocabulary or lexis, and phonology or pronunciation. Those are the three elements of language.
那首先呢，把语言拆开来，它3个重要的元素就是文法、字汇或是词汇、音韵学或是发音，这就是语言的3大要素。
So I'm going to give you a breakdown of those individual 3 things, tie it back to listening, reading, writing, speaking, and how languages are learned, and then we'll look at assessment.
那所以呢，我们会先介绍一下这3大要素以及它跟听说读写之间的关系，然后再来看我们做的英语考试检定的部分。
So grammar, the simplest explanation of it is it's morphology plus syntax. Morphology is just how our words form. So play, plays, played, or happy, the adjective, happiness, the noun, unhappy, the opposite of happy, unhappily, the adverb.
首先我们来看文法，文法就是构词学加上句法。构词学就是字词是怎么形成的，像我们刚刚举例， 玩，然后现在是过去式，或是快乐，它的形容词、名词、相反词等等。
Syntax is word order in a sentence or a question. So, for example, I like to eat apple ice cream is okay, but the cat is the table on is obviously inaccurate in terms of syntax.
那句法就是一个句子或是问句当中字词的顺序，像我喜欢吃苹果双麒麟这个顺序是对的，但是猫是桌子上这个顺序就不对。
So there's 3 questions I'd like you again to discuss with the person next to you. Again, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes. Which of those do we learn first, morphology or syntax? Which one is taught and tested in schools first? And why is that? And which one do you think is tested in proficiency exams for young learners or for lower levels? And why?
那我接下来呢，也一样要请大家跟前后左右的人讨论一下这几个问题哦。首先第一个就是这2个构词学跟句法，我们是先学哪一个？然后在学校又是先教哪一个？然后在考试里面又是会考哪一个？先考哪一个？请跟你的前后左右的人讨论一下，1分钟的时间。
Okay, I'm going to give you my answers, and if your answers are vastly different, please tell me. Which one do we learn first? We learn syntax before we learn morphology. We learn the ability to put words in a sentence to say what we mean before we worry about whether we've added S or ED to a verb. And also the way that our brains work in terms of language learning, syntax is learned first.
好，我先把我的答案给各位。如果你们的答案不一样，再跟我说。首先，从学习语言的角度来看，我们的大脑事实上是先学句法，再学构词学。我们会先学习这个句子的字到底应该要怎么摆，然后之后才会去学那些时态。大脑也是这样子在运作。
Now, before you say I'm saying teachers are bad, if you are in an environment where you've got 40 kids in the classroom, all at different levels, it's very difficult to test syntax and a lot easier to test morphology.
那接下来我并不是要谴责老师做的不好，但是如果说你的班级人数很多，然后大家的程度都不一样的话，你要考试的时候，当然是先考构词学，比较容易，而不是先去考他们句法。
Because it's a lot easier to make a multiple choice test where the students have to circle play, plays, or played than what it is to make a test where you can test syntax.
那当然，因为在考试的时候用选择题再去考他们动词三态，会比你去考他们的句法能力来得容易得多。
Generally in proficiency exams for young learners at low levels, things are tested at sentence level. So the syntax is more important at low levels than the morphology.
但是呢，如果是一些能力考试或者是初级水准一些考试检定的话，他们就会比较看整个句子的句法跟含义，而不是就是看那个构词学的部分。
Another quick little task for you. 4 words on the board: bath, have, can, What's the Chinese for those words?
再很快考大家一下，现在投影片上面看到4个字 bath、have、can 跟在中文里面个别的对应翻译是什么？
All right, you can just shout out the answer. Bath has 2 translations. What can they be?
大声的把你们的答案说出来。Bath 它可能有2个可能的答案是什么？
洗澡 is one. What's the other one? It's the thing in your bathroom where you bath in. What's that called?
除了洗澡之外，还有你洗澡用的那个东西，你浴室里面的那个东西。
Igang, yeah. So igang or 洗澡. What about have? Yo, good. What about can? Koi or? Koi, good. And what about Iga. Now, you teach your students these words, and then they read these 3 words, have a bath. And they go, oh, yo, Iga, Igang. Does that make any sense?
对，但是如果你教学生这几个字它个别的中文含义，然后再告诉他 have a bath 这个词的时候，学生如果直接把它1对1翻译过来，或者是有一个浴缸，这样对吗？
So the important thing when you think about vocabulary is not just the individual words, it's also the pronunciation of those words and how the pronunciation might change. It's the collocations that they appear in, and also the phrases in which they appear, so that you know, and your students know, have a bath is a single lexical unit. It means something specific.
所以呢，其实，在教他们字汇的时候，除了个别字的发音，还有它之外呢，事实上还要让他们知道这些字使用的语境是怎么样，或是他们跟其他的字组合起来又是什么样子的意思。要用一个词汇的角度去思考它，让他知道 have a bath 它就不是3个字拆开来的意思，而是合在一起是一个词汇。
So let's have a quick look at phonology or pronunciation. Individual sounds obviously are important, and I think often when people speak about pronunciation, they speak about individual sounds. However, pronunciation is a lot more than that. Things like connected speech, word stress, sentence stress, and all of those kind of things. But the 2 most important questions are, if you speak, can I understand you? And if I speak, can you understand me? Pronunciation goes both ways. Can you process the language, and can you produce it so other people can understand you?
那我们来看音韵学。音韵学这个发音的时候，通常大家都讲的是单个发音的声音，但是其实发音不只是这样子而已。音韵学或是发音来说，最重要的2个点是：第一个，我可不可以听得懂你在说什么；还有你可不可以听得懂我在说什么。所以对于发音的掌握，就是在于你能不能去处理你听到的东西，以及产出让别人听得懂的东西。
So a little example of what might happen to a language learner. What does this mean? And what is the person trying to say? So you have on the board there, can you help me? And I want an apple. What is the person actually trying to say?
那所以呢，对于一个语言学习者来说，我们可以试试看这个投影片上的2个例子。看起来它是 Can you help me 跟 I want an apple， 但是你听到这样子的句子的时候，你可以了解他要说的是什么吗？
Because often what would happen with language learners is they hear what they think is that, and what the person said was, can you help me? I want an apple.
所以如果他今天只是刚刚学习这个语言，还没有那么掌握它的发音的时候，他听起来就是 Can you 合在一起变成了 Can ya， 它听起来像是这个字，或者是 I want to eat apple， 它把音连在一起变成这样，但是实际上我们要说的是，你可不可以帮忙我，或是我想要吃苹果。
So just a quick summary of, we need syntax because it conveys meaning. We need vocabulary, not only one words but chunks, because it helps us to communicate. And we need phonology or pronunciation because it helps us be understood and understand other people.
所以呢，首先呢，我们在语言里面之所以需要这3个要素，就是有句法，我们才可以了解你的意义是什么。然后呢，有单字的话，你可以把你想要讲的东西说出来。那发音也可以让对方了解你的内容。
Those 3 things obviously are important, and the question then that we need to keep asking ourselves is this what we're assessing from our students? Are we testing their ability to work with grammar, work with vocabulary, and work with pronunciation?
所以呢，这个就是我们要问我们自己的问题，就是我们现在在帮学生做评量或者是评估他们的能力的时候，我们真的有评估到这些东西吗？评估到他们的句法、文法能力、他们的智慧，还有他们的发音呢？
So let's quickly look at learning a language. It's a lot of text on the screen, so you can read it, and I just realized a spelling mistake. Five NT dollars for the person who spots it. The rules we teach, I mean the grammar from textbook, and the rules in our subconscious when we learn a language, or called interlanguage, I spoke about it earlier, are not the same. Interlanguage comprises grammar, lexis, phonology, the whole range of things, and it's completely subconscious.
那接下来我们要讲的是语言学习的一些关键问题。那刚刚我在前面的那个座谈已经有讲到这些内容了，那我们就很快的讲过去，就是我们在文法书里面讲的这些语言的规则，跟我们潜意识里面的语言规则是不一样的。我们潜意识里面有一个语言规则叫做所谓的中介语，它包括了语法、词汇、音韵学等所有跟语言有关的东西。
Textbook rules, like we teach in textbooks, require you to think about language like it's math. It becomes more of a problem-solving and rule application ability than actually proficiency.
那在教科书里面去教的这些语言的规则，事实上是让你把语言当成数学一样再去思考，所以它考的是你的问题解决能力，还有应用规则的能力，而没有真的考到你的语言熟练使用能力。
And proficiency exams have been in existence for more than 100 years. There's lots of data. So if a student cannot read or write, or they can only read and write up to a certain level, we can make very accurate assumptions about their grammatical, vocabulary, and phonological knowledge.
但是呢，我们讲到这种能力测试、能力测验呢，他们因为已经存在100年以上，我们有非常大量的资料跟数据可以去做相关的研究，所以我们可以判断，如果一个学生在阅读或写作方面的表现不好的话，就可以准确的去评估他们的这些句法、词汇跟语音的音韵学的知识，应该也是有同等的状况。
So what do learners need to learn? They need lots of comprehensible input because it helps you form those rules in your subconscious. They need challenge and engagement. They want to like doing it. They need the opportunity to use the language because it helps them refine language rules in their heads. And they need opportunities to experiment with the language by doing tasks or actually engaging in real meaningful communication.
那我们来看说，如果一个学习者他要学习语言，他需要些什么？他需要大量可以理解的输入，来帮助他们形成他们脑中的中介语。那他也要有挑战跟参与感，愿意去做尝试，有机会去使用这个语言，才能够更完善他脑中关于这个语言的规则。那也可以去实验使用这个语言。
So if you look at stories in language learning, stories provide lots of comprehensible input. They provide engagement. They give you the opportunity to use the language when engaging with the storyteller, and they give you opportunities to experiment with the language through telling and listening to stories.
那故事跟语言学习有什么关系呢？故事可以提供大量的可理解的输入，而且让人有参与感，而且他有机会听故事的人可以跟说故事的人互动，并且呢，透过重新讲这个故事或听这个故事去实验那个语言。
And it's important to remember that the grammar, vocabulary, and phonology we spoke about earlier appear in stories. They appear in every little bit of language we use.
而且我们刚刚讲到的语言里的3大要素，句法、字汇跟音韵学，事实上也都有出现在故事里面。
So if you're looking at language assessment, this is an example. You have multiple choice, morphological or discourse options. So Sam always goes, going, or went to the park, and the student have to choose A, B, C, or D. Or an option of a discourse option. Who is that girl? A, she's a girl. B, my best friend. C, she's happy. D, I know that girl. Just testing discourse or interaction.
那所以呢，我们看语言它怎么样去做评估或是评量的。那你可以用选择题的方式去考一些构词学的东西，或者是以对话的方式来让他们做选项。像这边2个题目就是这样子的例子。
So in schools, what challenges do you have with assessment? Here are a few of them. You work with mixed ability classes, and sometimes your test is too easy for the strong students and way too difficult for the weaker students. You have a massive marking load. You might have to mark 200 exams every time there's a test. There are inevitable errors or oversight in exams because you don't have a lot of time to edit and pre-test your exams. And the last thing is, there's a limited range to test with because of the fact that strong students might get bored with the exam, and weak students might find it too difficult.
那在老师学校里面去做评量的时候，有一些什么样子的挑战呢？首先，你带的班级大家的能力程度不一，那有的人可能觉得很简单，有的人觉得很难。然后考试你要评分的这个数量也很大，可能一次要改200份的考卷，然后你有可能会犯一些人为的错误，毕竟大家都是人嘛，你没有办法完整的去做考卷的编辑啊，或者是说一些预先的测试。而且呢，因为你的考试是有范围的，程度好的学生就会觉得太简单，程度不好又觉得太难。
So what should be assessed? Students' ability to speak, including short answers and extended responses. So considering things like, what's your name? Mark is a good answer. My name is Mark is okay, but somewhat unnatural. We don't actually say it like that. What's in your bedroom? Bed. Not good. A bed, a chair, a desk, and my toys is an excellent answer. There is a bed in my bedroom is okay, but not special. The ability to write with a communicative purpose rather than just to show language knowledge, and comprehension skills in reading and listening. Those are the things we should assess.
那我们到底要去评量学生具有哪一些能力呢？首先是他们说话的能力，他们可以用简答或者是更延伸的答案去回答一个问题。像在这边2个例子，问你叫什么名字的时候，就有不同的回答方法，或者是你的房间里面有什么，你可以如果只会用单字来回答，可能就不够好，比较多的这个内容的延伸的答案就会更好。那我们也要评量学生可不可以去书写具有沟通意图的内容，而不是只是表现他的语言能力、语言知识而已。那再来，他也要必须有理解能力，可以来阅读跟聆听。
And in about 2 or 3 minutes, I'll be done. We start looking at the test. But something that is important is sometimes teachers worry that students don't say enough. And I say, stop asking them questions like, what did you eat for breakfast? What's your favorite food? Because if you ask it to people, they're just going to go, bacon and eggs. Or I like pizza. If you want them to say something more, use a prompt that generates that, and we're going to look later at a story retelling task that gets that longer speaking out of them.
那等一下我们就会来看我们这个检定的方式。那很多老师都会担心说他们的学生口语能力表达练习的不够多。那我要说的就是你们不能只一直问他们一些很简单的问题，就你最喜欢的食物是什么？你早餐吃什么？那他就只会给你一些单字很简单的回答，而是应该要问他们一些更有开放性，让他可以去产出更多内容的答案的问题。所以等一下我们就会示范，比方说用故事，要求他们重说一个故事，就可以去训练他们运用更多的口语能力。
So grammar and vocabulary is assessed through those communicative tasks, like I mentioned earlier. And without control over grammar, vocabulary, phonology, those kind of things, they won't be able to speak, write, read, or listen. So we can make judgments on their ability based on their ability to work with communicative tasks.
那怎么样去评估他们的文法或者是字汇的能力呢？事实上一样是透过沟通型的这样评估的任务，因为他必须要能够掌握文法跟字汇，还有这个音韵学，他才能够去做听说读写。
And then something that comes up, what about mistakes? The sentence I have on the slide there is, my mother is very like pizza because her favorite food is cheese and pineapple. And you're going, there's 2 mistakes in it. And we're going, there's 15 correct words in the right word order over there also. So with assessment, don't always look at what are they doing wrong, it's what can they do right.
那大家就会说啊，那他们犯错怎么办？像这边投影片上面这个句子，事实上呢，你可以看过去就知道说他在文法上可能犯了2个错误，但是这当中有15个字他都是拼对的，他是对的，而且字词的顺序也是对的。所以我们看的事实上是这个学生他能做对的东西是什么，而不是看他做错的东西。
So things that we need to do, provide them with a supporting environment, be the caregiver of the language learning, encourage experimentation, let them use the language, give them lots of comprehensible input through stories and interactions with you. Remember that you, as a person who can tell stories about your life, is a massive source of comprehensible input, and help your students self-assess what they can do, and then decide what they cannot do and what they want to learn.
那最后就是我们要怎么帮助我们的学生呢？你可以提供他非常大量的 一个可理解的内容，你要给他一个支持性的环境，然后要鼓励他们去实验使用这个语言，而且你可以用你自己的故事来提供更多他们可理解的内容，来跟他们讲故事，然后帮助你的学生去自我评估他们自己的能力到哪里，然后他们可以决定他们接下来要做什么，要怎么做。
All right. I suggest if you have a phone, take a picture of my email because I would like us to look at the test first. And if there isn't time for questions or all the questions you might have at the end, feel free to email me. We will have a question time at the end, but I'd like us to get to the test so you can see what Rudders has to show you.
那大家可以先把我用拍照把我的 email 留下来，因为呢，我们接下来要讲的就是我们的英语初级检定的内容。那讲完，如果还有时间可以接受大家提问，如果没有时间的话，大家也都可以写 email 来问我。
Okay, so what we're going to look at is the British Council Primary English Test. This is a demo, and what we'll do is we'll skip through some of the tasks because we want to show you the listen and retell task. Once I hit start, we'll play the introduction, okay? And just a very short background. The test is story-based, which is what Gerhard was talking about, and it takes students through an adventure. The theme of the practice test that the demo is based on is Super Ninja School. It's a theme-based park. Takes them through different experiences, through different modules, and it is stage adaptive. Again, this is just demo, so we'll show you the beginning. It's a short video, and then we'll skip through the listen and retell task, and we'll talk about it.
好，这边呢就是我们的这个儿童英语检定 Primary English Test 的一个示范版。那所以我们中间会跳过一些任务，主要要给大家看就是我们的强调关于听力还有重说故事的这方面的检定方式。等一下我按下去以后，就有一个很简短的介绍，说明它的背景，还有刚刚我们讲的，它是以故事为基础的一个检定方式。然后呢，它的故事背景就是在一个忍者的主题乐园里面的一个冒险，那有各种不同的考试的模组，然后它也是可以去调整它的不同的程度。那我们先来看一段影片。
This is the introduction, and then it follows different integrated tasks and skills, which is also quite important. So you have listening into reading, listening into writing, and so forth. So I'm going to skip to the listen and retell.
那刚刚是前面开头的介绍，然后之后就会有很多整合性的任务要学生去完成。那有可能是听力加阅读、听力加写作，我们现在是听力加重述。
Okay.
Listen and retell. This is Miss Monster. She loves ice cream. Last night, after Cloud Park was closed, Miss Monster secretly walked into the park's ice cream shop. You must find her and stop her before she eats everything. Ms. Cloud will tell you what happened last night. First, listen to Ms. Cloud. Then tell Adam and Jay what Miss Monster did in the park.
Last night, Miss Monster came into the park through the front gate. First, she walked past the roller coaster. She walked so fast that she dropped one of her shoes. Next, she met the clown in front of the mini train ride. She said hi to the clown and gave him half of an apple. Then she went into the ghost house and looked around. She came out quickly because it was very dark inside. Finally, she arrived at her favorite place, the ice cream shop. I think she's still there now. She looks like she never wants to leave.
Now tell Adam and Jay what happened last night. Ready? Start.
Okay, so this is the listen and retell, and I'm going to turn it to Gerhard.
这就是我们刚刚看到一个例子，他要听，先练听力，然后再来要求他重讲。
If you have students and you think, ooh, this is be very difficult for them, the test is adaptive. We're just showing you a demo. So by the time it gets to the listen and retell, it might be easier for them if they are of a lower level. But basically what happens in an adaptive test is you do one part, without going into too much detail, you do one part and it decides if you are good or not so good with that. And then you go into two different parts. And then maybe if you're very good in that part as well as you were good and good, the last part is a bit more difficult. You have a part that's really easy and you have a part in the middle. So the test bases the difficulty on how they performed in previous parts.
那在这边呢，如果说你们刚刚看这个内容，觉得这个对你的学生来说可能说太难了，事实上我们这个整个考试的机制是可以调整的，它会随着前面一个考试的前面一个部分学生的表现来决定说他下一个会怎么样，所以他前一个部分的表现可能是很好，或者是没那么好，那他后面可能就会有2个程度的考试的题目可以让他去，我们会去做调整。所以他如果说一直都表现得很好的话，可能到最后的考试就非常的难，那或者是他有个地方做的比较不好，那后面的考试会比较简单。
So what's happened here is they've listened to a story. There are prompts that we're not asking them to memorize the entire story. They, ordered to the different places that she went to, act as prompts, and the student then has to retell the story.
那在这个听力跟重述的这个考试的部分呢，我们没有要求学生把整个故事全部都把它死背起来，而是给了他们这样一些提示，告诉他说他去了哪里，他要去了哪里，让学生可以去做重新讲一次的工作。
Something that is important in terms of the scoring of this, and actually the scoring of speaking in general, is you're not scored or awarded to score based on your ability to memorize things. you're scored on your ability to produce a coherent, extended response to the speaking, and in this case, it's just telling the story.
那在评分的部分很重要，尤其是在口语能力的评分方面，很重要的是不要去根据这个人有没有把东西全部死背起来来评分他的口语能力，而是要去评分说他能不能制造出这个语言的产出，然后它是一致的，然后它是可以去延伸的，然后去回应的需求的。像这个例子就是他可以重新讲出这个故事。
So I'm going to tie this back into the classroom just very briefly. Let me start again. I'm going to just take the exam task and relate it to things you can do in the classroom.
那所以呢，我们这样子的考试的形式，我们要怎么样跟我们在课堂上做的这个教学做连接呢？
So in terms of listening to a story and then retelling it, you could have a map, you could have 3 or 4 like cartoon kind of pictures, or your students can draw pictures while you're telling them a story.
那像我们要训练他们关于听故事，然后重新讲一个故事的话，你可以利用这里像是地图做一个提示，或者是一幅漫画，或者是要学生一边听一边画东西出来。
And your students, once you've told them the story, then retells the story based on whether they picture some map or what they've drawn.
那等你讲完这个故事，或者学生听完这个故事的时候，学生就可以利用他手上有的这个材料，不管是地图啊，还是画，还是漫画，然后重新把故事讲出来。
And it does 2 things for you in the classroom. One, it forces your students to produce longer languages, what you want, instead of just asking them questions. And 2, if you manage it properly, it allows your students to notice what they don't know. And when they notice what they don't know, they pay attention when other kids might be retelling the story, so they can learn those words and use them. It's the just-in-time learning that's more effective.
那这样做事实上有2个好处，第一个呢，就是你可以让学生练习讲出更长的句子、更长的内容，去训练他们的口语表达。再来呢，就是如果处理得当的话，学生事实上会注意到他不知道什么东西，他可能在别人讲的时候就会特别注意听别人有没有讲到他不会的那个字，然后把它运用在他自己要讲的故事里面。所以这是一个所谓的 just in time 的学习方式，就是非常及时，配合他当下的需求的学习。
And as much as you wouldn't care if they've used the same words from your model, we don't care if they use the same words from our model. It's just the ability to tell the story.
那而且呢，就是我们并不会特别强求说他们一定要用跟我们一样的示范用的那些字词，没有，重点是他有能力可以把这个故事重新讲出来。
We'll show you one more example, which is a writing task, which again feeds in very nicely to what we talked about in the first half of the workshop.
那接着我们再看一个练习，一个例子，就是关于他的写作任务，这个也很符合我们刚刚讲的内容。
Okay, so I will type a few things just for you to see. So it's basically, again, it's a writing task. Now they would need to be able to type, but let me show you what it looks like. You should be able to see the question. Sorry.
那这是一个写作测试的部分，那我们要打一些字进去，那我们来示范一下。
Do I need to click? let me talk about it first. So this is just an example of an answer that I typed. There are prompts, so we're asking for about a 25-word response, and if you really think about it, if you've answered those 3 questions, you should be very close to or around 25 words. We're not for this, for example, you don't have to produce a massive long text, but you have to answer those 3 questions. And the assessment is based around how effectively have you communicated your answer to those questions.
那在这个例子当中呢，我们可以看到，事实上我们会给他们一些写作的提示，就是问他们这3个问题。那事实上，如果你可以回答到这3个问题，你大概就可以达到25个字这样子的一个要求。那在这个例子当中，事实上我们并没有要求学生要写一个很长篇大论的东西，而是重点是他可以针对问题给出答案，表示它是一个有效的沟通，他可以看到问题，知道要回答什么。
The other important thing here is the fact that so everything is happening around that story. So the task is again Mrs. Cloud's the supercomputer. That context just makes it a lot less stressful, and the fact that even if the child goes, well, I don't know where I want to live, but it's not you, it's the character in the story. So it's a lot easier for them to not feel pressured to produce language.
那再来一点呢，就是因为这一切都是围绕着一个故事在进行，所以像这边这个任务，我们会把它设定成是有一个超级电脑，然后他在跟他对话，让学生比较不会有压力，或者是学生会说啊，这个回答这个问题我不知道怎么样，但是他不用把它当成他自己，他可以把自己当成故事里面的一个角色，让他在回答的时候比较没有压力。
Reorder the sentence. Voice message. Don't snap. Oops. You and your friend look at the 2 pictures. Describe the picture. And that.
Oh, where is the? Oh, it's not there. Well, I was trying to get to. There is a screen, which is not coming up. In the end, because it's part of the demo, there is congratulations screen, which I think it's quite important for young learners to encourage them. It is not a pass or fail test. It's general proficiency. Everyone gets this congratulation, and they have this feeling of having achieved something. It is stage adaptive, as we mentioned earlier, so in the end, when they do get the score report, yes, they have different scores, but they all have this sense of, yes, I've completed the adventure and I followed my characters.
这边呢，电脑上的荧幕没有投出来，但是基本上它就是一个一切结束之后有一个恭喜画面，因为我们认为对于儿童来说呢，鼓励事实上是很重要的，所以不是说让他们做完整个测试以后你会看到通过或者是失败这样，而是最后会给他一个恭喜，因为当然我们是一个能力测试嘛，所以做完以后会让他们有一种完成什么事情的感觉。那最后当然有相关的成绩单，他们会有知道他们的成绩，可是对于学生来说，做完的时候他们会很有成就感。
Okay, before I give the floor to you for questions, my colleagues here at the British Council, right next door, so if any one of you is interested in more information, please reach out to them, and thank you.
好，那等一下可以开放给大家提问，不过提醒大家，我们旁边有英国文化协会的摊位，在那边我们的同事都可以回答任何大家对于这个有兴趣相关的问题。谢谢。
Last thing from me, I think the most important thing with stories and what we've spoken about here is you want the experience for the child to be positive. So they don't view the test as something that they need to be scared of. So the story element, the characters, all of those kind of things is to make the experience positive.
最后，我们这边要提的一点就是呢，以故事为基础这样子的测验，我们认为对于儿童来说呢，是他们在学习方面会有正面的感觉，他们不会觉得考试是一个很可怕的东西，而是在看一个故事，然后里面有一些人物，整体的感受都是非常正面的。
All right, over to you if you have any questions.
有问题的话，欢迎大家提问。
I'm going to pass the microphone along.
Thank you. Just one question. You talked about the adaptability of the test. Obviously, in terms of language level, I imagine is it also adaptable in length? So if it's quite challenging for a student, will the test end up being a bit shorter for them?
简单讲一下，因为我们讲这个是可以调整的这个测试，除了语言能力的根据语言能力调整之外，它会不会因为学生表现得不好，表示这个内容太难，就把这一段缩短一点的时间呢？
It's an excellent question. We did think about that. Yes. So if you noticed, a lot of the tasks here in the top right corner had a timer. Depending on the task, you had from 15 seconds to 2 or 3 minutes to answer the task.
那是的，我们确实有思考过这个部分哦，就是大家刚刚有注意到右上角有个计时的标示，所以呢，随着任务的难易度不同，它可以是15秒到2-3分钟都有。
So in the actual test, the next button that's down there, there's no back button in the actual test. It's just for demo. The next button becomes active after 3 seconds. So for students who know the answer and they want to move quicker, they can click the next button as soon as they're finished with the task. They don't have to wait for the timer, unlike some other digital tests where you have to sit there and wait.
那如果说是真实的测试的时候，刚刚我们有一个下一个 next 的那个按钮，那在真实的测验里面就不会有回头的那个按钮。那这个下一个的按钮呢是3秒钟之后就可以启动，所以如果这个学生程度很好，他一下就做完，他很快就可以按下一个，不像其他的考试，你可能要坐在那边等时间到才可以做下一题。
So students who need all the time to answer the task, they can take the time. And even if they're not finished, it will move automatically to the next one once the timer is finished. And those who know the answers, they can move faster. So this is how the length of the test for faster students is shorter than other students.
所以呢，事实上就是学生他当然也可以选择等个时间全部都走完，然后去进行下一题，然后或者是比较快做完的学生，他就可以比较快的进入到下一题。所以学生可以根据他们的程度调整他们考试的时间。
Any other questions?
还有其他问题吗？
No. Thank you very much. 谢谢你。